Diplomacy is the art of influencing the decisions and behavior of foreign governments and their peoples through dialogue and negotiations and other non-violent means, with the objective, of course, of promoting your own nation's interests and values. Now, we all know that Kenya has ambassadors posted to various countries around the world as representatives of our head of state. What we don't know is that to be a diplomat, you must possess a myriad of skills that range from a wide knowledge of history, a deep understanding of culture of the peoples of the countries where you serve, and most important, ambassadors have to be people persons. To discuss this subject further, we are greatly honored to have today as our guest Her Excellency Ambassador Catherine Muigai Mwangi. Welcome, Ambassador, and thank you for talking to Three Stones TV.
Thank you, Rose. I am firstly delighted that you've invited me to come and have this discussion on diplomacy. For those who don't know, I have a long history really with Three Stone through Rose's previous engagements in the media. So indeed, I am delighted and honored to be here this morning and to have this conversation with you, Rose.
Thank you very much, Balozi. Now, a lot of people imagine that the job of an ambassador is to attend conferences in far-off places, to travel in planes and host receptions, generally the easy life. Now, you're Kenya's ambassador to Ethiopia and to the African Union. Perhaps you can start off this discussion by you telling us what is your role, what is the role that you perform as Kenya's ambassador to Ethiopia and the African Union?
Really, yes, it is somewhat a misconception about an ambassador's role, an ambassador's life when they are posted to the various countries or organizations. You're right. As Kenya's ambassador to Ethiopia, I am the president's personal representative in that country, as well as Kenya's representative. My biggest role is to enhance, to build on, and to maintain cordial working relations, for instance, now with Ethiopia. So that takes on different elements, because if we're talking about enhancing and promoting Kenya's interests, there'll be issues of promoting trade, there'll be issues of cooperation on matters of security. So it is indeed a job where at the forefront is ensuring that I understand what are Kenya's interests, for instance. What is it that I wish to promote in Ethiopia? And thereby then engaging with the relevant government authorities and other stakeholders to ensure that we progress and build on what is actually a very strong relationship between our two nations. And then, as you've mentioned, I am also the permanent representative, and I will explain the difference between ambassador and permanent representative to the African Union. And again, representing Kenya's interests in this organization that brings together all the 55 countries of Africa. This is where Africa's issues are discussed. And again, therefore, as we discuss issues of Africa, how does Kenya fit in? How do you ensure that while being Pan-African, while making sure that you take into consideration the interests of the continent, that Kenya's interests are also represented, and that we make sure that any decisions arising out of the African Union are of benefit to the country. So just quickly, Rose, to say that you have ambassadors, you have high commissioners, you have permanent representatives. An ambassador is one that is posted to a country which is not a member of the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. That is why I'm an ambassador. Because although Kenya is Commonwealth, Ethiopia is not, so I'm an ambassador. A high commissioner is one that is posted from a country that is a member of the Commonwealth to another country that is a member of the Commonwealth. So that's where you have high commissioners. We do exactly the same work, but that is the difference in our titles. A permanent representative is one accredited to an international organization. So my title is therefore Ambassador and Permanent Representative because of my accreditation to the African Union. Our ambassador who's accredited to New York, to the UN, is also a permanent representative. So just that we are clear, that's the difference in title. So I carry two titles of ambassador and permanent representative.
Well, thank you, Balozi, for clearing that. A lot of people use these terms interchangeably, High Commissioner, Ambassador, not actually realizing that they're quite different. You mentioned you are the Kenya's permanent representative to the African Union. And this is an organization of countries in Africa. Previously, it was known as the Organization of African Unity. Why was the name changed? What is the difference? Do they play different roles? Does African Union play a different role from the Organization of African Unity? And how do we benefit? I know you represent our interests, but in what areas? Do these cover climate change, security? What areas are we represented on the African Union? And what's the benefit to Kenya in particular?
Rose, as I get into my role and indeed what is the relevance of the African Union to Kenya, let me also say what I forgot that is extremely important in my job is ensuring that I look after the interests of Kenyans in Ethiopia. So that is the role of any head of mission, any ambassador or high commissioner, that it is your responsibility to ensure that you take care and manage issues of your diaspora in your particular country. To come back to the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, was formed in May 1963. And these were heads of state of African countries that had become recently independent. And they formed this organization to give them an opportunity to coalesce or to come together and see specifically how they can work as a group to foster or to move forward Africa's interests. And the main thing here was about ensuring the liberation of all the other countries that had not been liberated. So it was really that was the driving force behind, or the driving idea behind the formation of the African Union. So obviously, Pan-Africanism had become a big ideology as Africa became independent and decolonized. So there was the element of how do we get all the other nations free and independent? How do we progress the ideology of Pan-Africanism or pride in being African? How do we grow as countries who've just come out of the colonial problem? How do Africans get to a point where they can rule themselves in a dignified manner, ensure that we have peace and security and stability in our nations? So the OAU really, it was focused on formation of nations. First of all, moving them from colonialism into free nations, and then forming these nations forming these entities into nations that can govern themselves and prosper their people and ensure we have peace and stability in the continent. So that was the main drive of the African Union, ridding the continent of colonialism and ensuring free and fair continent. So in late 1990s, about 1999, 1998, the heads of state of Africa appreciated that Africa was finally free with the destruction and dismantling of apartheid. And at that point, they decided that the agenda for this organization that had formed, the thrust, the focus, needed to move beyond to what would then bring about a prosperous Africa. And that was the formation of the African Union. And in 2002, in Durban, South Africa, the AU, the African Union, was launched. And really, one of the areas that the president said they would focus on is integration of Africa, so that the African people could grow together, so that the African people could deal with their challenges and their issues together, so that the African people could look at opportunities that would benefit the continent together, so that they felt together Africa would move forward, would prosper, and would grow. So that really was the driving force, and that is what has driven the African Union agenda. These issues, of course, of ensuring peace, security, and stability in the continent and individually as member states of the African Union. There's the issue of course, ensuring prosperity for the people of Africa. There's issues of ensuring governance and the rule of law in the continent. And these are issues that continue to be discussed and promoted within the African Union using various protocols, i.e. decisions that are reached by the heads of state. Countries sign onto these protocols and say, as Africans, or we as this African country agree that this is how we will manage our elections, this is how we will manage how we treat our neighbors, this is how we will trade, just to ensure the greater good arising out of coming together as various nations. And as I've said, we are a total of 55 countries that make up the African Union. That is what is called the member states of the African Union.
Thank you, Balozi. Now, African Union was formed with very high ideals, as you've enumerated. I wanted to find out how close are we to achieving those ideals? Because today, what we know in Africa, we have different groupings and different organizations. What are these organizations? There's ECOWAS, there's SADC, there's COMESA, there's East African Union, there's IGAD. So for an ordinary Mwananchi, it's very confusing. We have one unifying organization, and then we have these other organizations. What are they and what is their role?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Rose, that there are these various organizations that exist within Africa. And the formation of these organizations came about as building blocks, as pillars to build towards the big organization. Because if you're looking at 55 countries, organizing them around one entity called the African Union is challenging. And it was felt that if you have these various regional blocks, which can then integrate, you can then use them as the building blocks towards a united Africa. So you will find, for instance, Kenya is a member of the East African Community. And you know that within the East African Community, there are many areas where we have commonality. We don't need visas to go to these countries. You can work in these countries. There's, so various, basically free movement. You can trade in these countries without undue taxes and problems. So, and that's the same with all the other blocks. ECOWAS is an example of a very well integrated region, and that's the 15 countries of West Africa. So once you have these blocks, it's then easier to bring these blocks together to form the integration at the higher level. So the reason for these groupings, and Kenya, as I said, belongs to the East Africa Community, which is, of course, the 6 countries now with South Sudan. We belong to IGAD, which is an organization that brings together the countries of the Horn of Africa. And the reason for that, and that is from Eritrea to Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, the reason for IGAD was because this region is threatened, especially by drought and challenges that need specific attention. So we belong to IGAD, and as I said, IGAD looks at issues especially to do with the environment, climate change, especially drought. If you think of those countries, there's drought. We've now just had this problem of desert locusts, It's also a region that is really quite fragile with issues of terrorism. We all know this. So IGAD looks at very specific issues, whereas maybe the East African community focuses more on trade. If you think about what really happens within the East Africa community, it's a lot of trade and integration based on trade. And then, of course, there's COMESA. COMESA, again, is now the bigger. COMESA is made up of the East African community, is made up of SADC. So it's a bigger grouping, again, for promoting trade. So this integration basically gives you access, especially to larger markets. If you look at the population of Kenya, it is 48 million. You then have access to the East Africa market, which is 170 or so million. Then if you go to the larger Africa, and I hope we'll get into the Africa Free Continental trade area, then you have a market of 1.2 billion people. So the reason for these organizations is really that alone you're weak, alone you're limited. But the more you can expand, and you can only expand in obviously an organized manner, and therefore this bodies that you're talking about, then you have that advantage. You have the advantage of also dealing with your challenges, even things like security challenges, also dealing with your challenges, even things like security challenges. Then you can deal with security across borders easier if you manage. It's no use managing Kenya if you're not managing what's happening across the border, because you will then have challenges being imported across the border. So these organizations then help countries look at their challenges at that level. So that's really the reason for integration. So the regional bodies you've just talked about are not instead of the African Union. They are pillars and building blocks towards a more integrated, stronger African Union.
Now, thank you. Now, Balozi, this organization, some may think that these free trade areas or cooperation and organizations will only benefit the big manufacturers, the big players. How do they translate into benefits for the ordinary mwananchi, the person doing business on the street? Starting a business, the trader, the juakali artisan who wants to maybe expand his market. Do these organizations, these groupings like East African Community, how do they help the ordinary mwananchi who forms actually the bulk of the business community, because the informal sector is actually bigger than the formal sector in this country?
That's a really important question, and I think you can throw in there women, because women are big traders, but sometimes they're disadvantaged in being able to compete in these larger markets. And let me speak about, for instance, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that will cover the continent, and then we can then say that is expected to be replicated in the smaller industries. And that's a specific area that even as we signed the protocol, because heads of state and government of Africa decided about opening up the continent for trade. To ensure that Africans trade with each other. Because if you look at the numbers now, Africa trades with everybody else except with itself. If you look at the numbers, maybe African trade, internal trade within Africa would be about what? 12%? Max 15%. The other is you're trading outside. So when this decision was made, obviously, a lot has to be done in terms, first of all, the frameworks, legal, all these things that will then make it possible to then trade with each other. And one of the areas that a lot of time was spent was dealing with small and medium enterprises, and also attention to women and youth, so that there is no disadvantage for these very critical members of our societies. And if you look at women are still trading. Women still trade. Kenyan women are still trading with Ugandan women. There's a lot of trade that goes on especially across borders, that is actually carried out by women and by small traders. So the question was, how do you upscale that? How do you ensure that these traders will have access to this market? And therefore, without getting into too much details, these protocols are very clear about the rules of origin. Where are these goods that you're saying can be traded in Africa coming from? Who is producing them? How is it produced? How do the people of that nation then benefit, as opposed to that there's importation from outside Africa into an African country, and then that African country is then trading those goods within Africa, because you then take away the advantage. You're now giving advantage to an outsider. So, Rose, all I would like to say is that these are areas that are contained in the documents that member states signed. And they really do compel you as a member state to ensure that indeed these protocols and what has been agreed is implemented in each country. And of course, it will be checked to ensure that the rules of origin, small, medium, what are the advantages? Small and medium size enterprises will be given advantage, so will women, so will youth. So that it's almost like having a quota, to ensure that indeed they have access to this market. So it's not a boardroom discussion. It is not something that we, is debated in Addis or in capitals. It is something that in its implementation will actually get into individual countries, into the grassroots, and promote. Of course, member states, countries must also take responsibility for ensuring that their small and medium enterprises, women and youth, have the opportunities, whether it is in terms of giving loans or credit or ensuring transportation. Member states have a role to play, but the overall agreement takes into account the ordinary person, because of a realization and recognition that prosperity for Africa, prosperity for countries will only come about when those that you have said are the majority are empowered and are able to participate in activities such as this.
Thank you, Balozi. Yeah, as you say, Africa will drive her own growth. Africa's growth will be driven by Africans themselves. Now, to turn to Ethiopia. Now, Kenya and Ethiopia have close relations for many, many years. And these relations date back to the famous friendship between our founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and Emperor Haile Selassie in the early 60s. Now, this unique friendship between these two countries, how does it benefit the ordinary mwananchi in Kenya?
You're absolutely right that those two great men of our two countries had a special friendship, which was, I feel, grounded on their desire, again, to see a free and prosperous Africa. And their friendship was translated into, first of all, a visa-free regime. You may not know this, Rose, but Kenyans are the only people of the world who do not require a visa to travel to Ethiopia. So it's actually such an honor that only Kenyans do not require a visa. So that in itself, of course, makes interaction between the two countries, easier. Secondly, our two countries signed a special status agreement. This was a protocol or an agreement that was to give Kenya special status in terms of trade and investment, between the two countries. So there is that advantage that Kenya has because of this special status agreement signed really with Kenya. And then, of course, because of the proximity, I think the evidence of how close Kenya and Ethiopians are is the number of Ethiopians you will find in Kenya, the number of Ethiopian restaurants you will find in Kenya. So that really is a demonstration of the closeness. Now, there has been really the pickup, especially the take-up of business between Kenya and Ethiopia, has been slowed down by two things. One, access. There was no access. There was no road to drive to Ethiopia. Secondly, as Ethiopia is landlocked, you cannot take things by ship. It means going through a different port, and then so that's complicated in terms of cost and time. So the only way to transport goods would be by air. So that has not helped in growing business, trade, investments between the two countries. But as you may know, the road now through Moyale is complete. So we have a road all the way from the port of Mombasa through Nairobi, Moyale to Addis Ababa. Excellent road. So we believe that this is now going to see a huge increase in business transacted, because as we said, business will start with business people, and it's not people who want to fly their cargo because it makes it expensive when it arrives. But if you can track whatever it is that is trading between the two countries, then I believe that in the next few years we will really see a huge increase between business to business activity in Kenya and Ethiopia.
Yes, Balozi, yes, as you say, the Northern Corridor, which is recently completed, has made travel so much easier. Somebody can leave Nairobi at very early in the morning, maybe at 4 a.m., and be at the border by 3 p.m. the same day, the border with Ethiopia. Now, Balozi, do you think there's enough awareness of this fact? Because we see traders, and especially women traders that you mentioned earlier, trading more with Uganda and maybe Tanzania than with Ethiopia. Yet it's within just a day's reach if you drive up, or a day and a half. Do you think enough publicity, enough awareness has been created about this Northern Corridor? And also, what are the areas of opportunity? Are there in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, or the whole country Ethiopia, for Kenyan businessmen and traders?
Okay, Rosa, I do agree that indeed the level of trade, for instance, between Kenya and Uganda is extremely high compared to my current country of accreditation. But the issue of movement was one. Secondly, then we have the hitch of we drive on different sides of the road. So yes, so whereas we are right-hand drive, they are left-hand drive. So that has always created a problem, because if you bring your goods to the border, you cannot drive across in your transport because of that problem. So it has, and vice versa. So it has meant that at the border, you have to offload from your transportation, whatever it is, the vehicle you're in, and put it into the vehicle of the other country. That created, that has created, of course, its own challenges. So these are the barriers that both sides are working at. Now that the road is open, how do we manage that issue of that we drive on different sides of the road? So maybe there hasn't been sufficient creation of awareness creation of this new road, because we recognize that there are those few, these are hiccups that we believe can be ironed out, will be ironed out, and the process will now be clear as to how it is the two countries are going to deal with this. There's huge appreciation on both sides on the potential that exists. For Kenyans, Ethiopia is a population of over 100 million people, and so close. That's huge potential. And so it's in our great interest to have these issues resolved. And I know, having been in Ethiopia for a while, it is the Ethiopians who are very close to Kenya, and they would like to be able to do business with Kenyans. As you know, Ethiopia is very, very, very well advanced in several areas, especially leather. They process their leather to the finest quality. And it's an area where there's huge opportunity for Kenya and Ethiopia to cooperate, whether it's export of finished goods or even the movement of raw leather from here to Ethiopia for processing. I mean, these are some of the areas that are opportune. So really, There's a huge opportunity for finished goods, whether it is cooking fats and and all these other things that we have being produced here. There's a huge market in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is importing a lot of these things. So there's a huge opportunity for Kenyans to export this. There's opportunity, and we are hoping that the Ethiopian government will finalize on the privatization of the telecommunications sector. I think that would be a huge opportunity for Kenya because, of course, this is an area where Kenya is also very advanced. Obviously, and in the area of tourism, because Kenya has been in tourism for so many years, I think there's a huge opportunity there. One, for Kenyans to invest in Ethiopia and grow capacity, amongst the Ethiopians, but also to have tourism between our two countries. I'm not sure Kenyans know much about Ethiopia and the attractions that Ethiopia has. As you know, Ethiopia was never colonized. They've managed to retain a great deal of their culture. And this very, very, very interesting, especially architecture, churches, very interesting attractions that are very different from Kenya. So there's huge opportunity for to grow tourism, from Kenya to Ethiopia and vice versa, or even joint products. People come to Kenya to see wildlife and to go to the beach. They can do that for several days and then go to Ethiopia and see, the cultural attraction. So there's huge opportunities between our two nations. And it's myself as the ambassador there. These are the areas that we constantly discuss with the Ethiopian authorities. Of course, there's a lot of exchange of meetings between the people of Kenya and the people of Ethiopia at technical, strategic level. So again, that's the job I do. Looking for these opportunities and ensuring that I get the right people to get into conversation with the right people in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is a fascinating country with a long history, a long Christian history. And Kenyans don't know, as you said, Balozi, don't know very much about it, or as much as they do about other neighboring countries. Can you tell us something about the people, the food, living there, for Kenyans to know a bit more about Ethiopia?
Yes, as you say, Ethiopia, and I keep saying this, not having been colonized is special. The people of Ethiopia take great pride in their country. I can say this without fear of contradiction, that really Ethiopian people are one of the most loyal to their country. They love their country, very, very, very patriotic, and look for every opportunity to promote their nation, their country, and their country's interests amongst us who are resident there and to the outside world. So they are very loyal people with very clear thinking about their country and what they need to do for their country, for it to grow, for it to improve. Ethiopians are very friendly people. They're very, very, very friendly. They have a humility, a humanness about how they approach things, and therefore are very welcoming and very accommodating of outsiders. Now, I can say, I know as a Kenyan, or as Kenyans, we definitely have a very special place in the hearts of Ethiopia. They basically do make everybody feel at home and very comfortable. And this is not just in Addis, because of course Addis is a huge diplomatic capital, with the African Union and also very many other international organizations and of course other countries represented there. So it's a huge diplomatic capital. So the people of Addis are used to engaging with foreigners. But even when you travel around the country, it's exactly the same. The people are warm, they're welcoming, they're happy that you have visited them. They're very strong in their faith, in their Orthodox faith, and very prayerful, and mark their days, their spiritual days, or days that are sovereign to their religion, with great pomp. And that's one of the areas one as a visitor must respect. It is something that they hold very dear and they revere. So that's one thing that as visitors one needs to be aware and to respect that. And they have churches, beautiful churches all over, not just in Addis but in the country. So it's an interesting experience. Living in Ethiopia. So that, together with the work at the African Union, makes the stay of a diplomat in Addis Ababa very exciting, very interesting, and very engaging. Really, we are engaged all the time.
Balozi, it appears Kenyans and Ethiopians have a lot in common, especially this warmth, being warm and friendly people. But perhaps there's one area that Kenyans can learn from Ethiopians, the patriotism and love of country and defense of one's country. And we hope we'll learn that when we visit a bit more. But now, Addis Ababa is a major hub in Africa for travel, for travelers from West Africa, for businessmen to other parts of the world. Is there something Nairobi can learn from Addis Ababa?
Yes, you are absolutely right, Ruth. And really, the answer is Ethiopian Airlines, a source of pride for Ethiopia. Ethiopian Airlines flies to practically every part of the world. And I think the Ethiopian Airlines saw opportunities and took advantage of those opportunities well ahead of many airlines in Africa. I think you remember the days in which you could not travel to West Africa or Central Africa without going through Europe or some other, overseas. And Ethiopian has opened Africa. They really understood travel in Africa, where obviously there was a huge gap. So they've captured that market. So that's why you have people, coming in from everywhere and going out to everywhere. Because basically wherever you want to go in Africa, and in fact in most other parts of the rest of the world, Ethiopian Airlines can take you there.
Yes, Balozi, and Baya, it's an airline that other African airlines should emulate as well. Before your current posting, you were Kenya's ambassador to Ireland for several years. You have had a very distinguished career in diplomacy. Now, can you tell us the skills that you have found that are necessary to be an effective and successful diplomat? And also, we'd like to hear, diplomacy is a field dominated by men. How have you fared as a woman, and have you experienced discrimination in your role as ambassador?
Yes, I served in Dublin, Ireland. I was honored to have been appointed to that posting because I opened the embassy. We did not have the diplomatic embassy there, so I opened the mission. It was a good, obviously, learning experience. Again, amongst very, very friendly people. As you know, the Irish worked in many of our countries, especially as missionaries, and that again, humanness is very evident in their country. So that was an extremely interesting experience. And just to say that when we opened our mission in Dublin, the relations between Kenya and Ireland were basically aid. They gave a lot of aid to various organizations in Kenya. So it was an aid-related relationship. And what I attempted to do, and I really can't say this without fear of contradiction, was to change that relationship to a more trade-related relationship. That Kenya had now matured, as many African countries had, from being reliant purely on aid to being a business partner. That there was opportunity for Irish business people to take advantage of in Kenya, as well as in other, obviously countries in Africa. And that was that was a big step forward. And I also led the formation of the Island Africa Business Forum, and we held a forum each year where we had various business people from Africa come and meet with business people from Ireland. So that was interesting in that way. You know, when you introduced this topic at the beginning, you mentioned what you believed diplomacy is about, and you're absolutely right. Really, to start with, I really believe one must have a passion for whatever it is that they choose to do. One must have a passion and a belief that they're in the right place and they're doing what they need to be doing, and they're doing what they want to be doing. Without the passion, whether it's diplomacy or anything else, you know, you don't get it. Obviously, because you're going to represent your country as the expert, the president's personal representative, you need to understand your country. You need to, you know, understand what are Kenya's interests, you know, what is it that I need to be promoting in you know, wherever it is that I'm accredited. What is Kenya's thinking about issues? What's Kenya's thinking about climate change? What's our thinking about the blue economy? What's our thinking about respect of another country's sovereignty and territorial integrity? You know, all these things you need to be very clear because you cannot speak and then retract or say, you know, you are there, and when you speak, you are seen to represent your president and your country. So you need to be very, very clear about that. And then, of course, also understand the country where you're at, where you've been posted, you know, because otherwise, how do you engage? How do you get into that position where you speak and that the other side sees this as a win-win or sees this to be of value and sees this as a way in which you enhance relationships. So one has to spend that time learning, understanding about your country of accreditation. A lot of time also must go into also establishing who are the critical areas, who are the critical people, where is it that you need to engage? Is it the minister of this? Is it the director of this? So you establish where will you get value? Where will you get outcome? Who do you need to speak to? How do you need to speak to them? Building relationships, therefore, is critical. And as you know, because I know you and I know you're a business person and the sort of business you've been in, building relationships is not easy. So one cannot get tired and there's no shortcut. You have to invest in building these relationships so people feel they can trust you. The element of trust is critical in diplomacy. People must feel that they can trust you, that you have integrity, that you really do represent, yes, your country's interests, but you do so with integrity, with truthfulness, and that you will deliver on anything you say you will deliver on, and that there's a level of predictability. It's not one day you're swinging this way and the other day. Because as I say, these are areas that will have long-lasting implications in some of them. So especially when you're dealing with an international or intergovernmental organization like the African Union, people will remember what was Kenya's position in this matter. How is it going to affect, this situation? So all those things are important as a diplomat.
Yes.
Obviously, the art of negotiation, the art of being able to give, take, negotiate, and come up with useful outcomes, useful especially to our own country's interests, and while ensuring that other parties don't feel that they're disadvantaged or they've been taken, that they've been disadvantaged, yes. And then, of course, building consensus. It's impossible to bulldoze a Kenyan position, for instance, and the African Union have another 54 countries that I have to convince. How do I build consensus so that people rally behind a position that I'm putting across for Kenya. How do you build that consensus? Again, the relationships, people saying, yes, we trust Ambassador Catherine. This is what Kenya stands for. They're consistent. Kenya is consistent. Kenya has integrity. Kenya has a Pan-African belief. So it's not always about Kenya. It's about Kenya, yes, but not at the expense of the rest of the continent. So some of these things, of course, you learn with experience, having been on the job. But I think there are some things that that they're skills, and that one does need. And well, basically, I think one has to be able to communicate. One must be able to communicate verbally and in written form. Be able to analyze things quickly, grasp, because if you're in a discussion, sometimes you have no time, to even consult, your capital and say, this matter, you have to respond. You must be able to put a position across. So you need to be able to analyze, understand, and come up with your intervention that will not in any way harm your country, but will increase your country as well as obviously provide benefit to whatever is the issue being discussed. So really, in short, I think those are some of the skills that one has to learn, and diplomacy is diplomacy. I think that we all say that person is diplomatic when they mean that person is polite, or that person spoke in a manner that did not in any way antagonize or offend another person, and that they were considerate, So I think that's obviously not, I think that's a critical element of, being able to ensure that you're not offensive and you're not in any way degrading or putting another country, especially because we're talking about countries. I'm not there as Catherine, me, myself. I'm there as Kenya. So anything that comes out of my mouth is Kenya speaking. Anybody who speaks against me is speaking against the country. So that's also something one must remember, that it's about your country. It's about your head of state. It's about your nation. It's about, it's not about you. You cannot be emotional that it's me and it's not. It's about ensuring that you appreciate and recognize you're there to represent your head of state and your nation at large, and the people of your country.
Yes, okay, Balozi, yes, and ultimately, as you say, all activity that you engage in is for the betterment of Kenyans, of the ordinary Mwananchi, the security and the advancement of Kenyan citizens. Now, you were recently involved, very highly involved, in the lobbying for Kenya to get a seat on the coveted seat on the United Nations Security Council. Can you tell us, what did this entail, and who was Kenya competing against, and how does it benefit Kenya and Kenyans to get a seat on the United Nations Security Council?
Yes, indeed, we are still celebrating having been elected as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the year 2021-2022. And just to say that the UN Security Council is the most powerful organ of the United Nations, and it is charged with maintaining peace and security in the world. So it's a huge responsibility, and it's very visible because, as you hear, really the issues of peace and security, maintaining peace and security, requires, great engagement, huge diplomatic skills, and has great influence really in the world. So Kenya put its candidature forward for this seat, and the beginning point is for international candidatures. Africa decided that they would seek to endorse one candidate for a position, because it gave you a better opportunity for being elected. So if you want to be a judge of the ICJ, for instance, or whatever post you want internationally, there are other countries who are also competing for the same post. So if you have 5 Africans from 5 different countries, you'll most likely split the vote and never get elected. So Africa leaders, in their wisdom, said, we will endeavor to always put forward one candidate to ensure that we stand a good chance of election. So the first place when you're seeking a seat in the international arena is you seek endorsement from the African Union. Does Africa believe you're the best person to represent them? So that's where we began. And I am eternally grateful to Africa, at the African Union in Addis, that the ambassadors endorsed Kenya as the candidate to go forward for the non-permanent seat. As it turned out, we did have a competitor, and we went through the campaign period together with Djibouti. Everybody knows that. In a respectful manner, we both recognize that as sovereign nations, we would seek this seat. So after the endorsement of Kenya, we then, of course, now moved on to New York, where the election was going to be. So it's been, it was like, a 2-year, very grueling, difficult campaign. And because, again, it's convincing people, is Kenya best suited to sit on the Security Council? Well, they represent the interests of one, Africa, because when you go into the UN Security Council, at any one time, there's 3 countries. At any one time, there are 3 countries of Africa. And your first, responsibility is to represent the interests of Africa, because you're there representing Africa amongst, the other members. So African countries must feel confident that indeed you're a safe pair of hands. That issue of integrity, and that even as be much as it is Kenya sitting there, that you will always, give due cognizance to issues of Africa and ensure that indeed you protect African positions. So that, basically is the determining factor. And other countries, because you're not also just elected by Africa. When you go to New York, it's everybody, all members of the United Nations. So they must also see you as a country that is going to bring benefit, that is, again, will have integrity and will be committed, because it's a difficult job. Once you're the UN Security Council, it's very difficult. It's a 24-hour, 7 days a week job. There's huge level of commitment at the highest level also. So all those things, people must, you must have some sort of record, in terms of your participation in diplomatic issues. So all those things come into consideration. And then finally, yes, we did get elected on that day in June, and it was a big thing. Now, in terms of, as I say, the UN Security Council is responsible for maintaining peace and security in the world. And if you look at most of the work for the UN Security Council, it revolves around Africa, because most of the crises, are in Africa. The challenges of peace, security, and stability are in Africa. So it's important that when one gets to the UN Security Council, you're able to appreciate that and say, fine, we're here, we're in a position where we can influence how the world deals with crisis situations in Africa. So you need to be able to do that. So it's important visibility for Kenya. It gives Kenya also an opportunity to promote some of the things that are very important to us, including women, peace and security. What are the issues that we are dealing with, regarding women? So all these things are important, not just at the continental level or even at the international level, but even in our own country. There's issues of terrorism, and all these issues that have security implications. So that's an opportunity for Kenya to be able to bring some of these issues on the table for discussion but in fact, really, I would call it, really one of the most powerful organs of the world that make decisions that, impact not just on, on the world, as I said, or Africa, but also impact on what is happening in Kenya. For instance, if you think about our fight against terrorism and what it means. So there's, and we are, at the end of the day, we're an international, we're members of the international world, and we must play our part. So we need to be able to engage on the international arena and ensure that indeed we are adding value to what's being discussed or what's being decided or what's happening on the international arena.
Balozi, congratulations. That was no mean feat to get us a seat on the UN Security Council. We'd like to congratulate you and the team for making Kenya proud. Now, Kenya's profile on the global stage has risen dramatically. The respect for the country and the status of Kenya has grown tremendously over the last few years. Now, remember about 20, 30 years ago, the countries that dominated Africa, the people you heard about, or the countries that you heard about, were mostly from the West or from the Francophone countries. But recently, Kenya has been playing on the world stage. Has this been by accident, or is it through concerted diplomatic effort? And does this translate into direct foreign investment? How does it benefit us, this greater profile around on the global stage? Do we get more tourists? Do we get more money in our pocket? Does it help our economy? How does this greater profile on the world stage benefit us as a country?
You're right, Rose, that indeed our profile has improved greatly, and it is definitely not by accident. It is a decision. Every country must decide how they want to position themselves to obviously its own citizenship, to the region, for instance, to the continent and to the world. And as you make that decision, you take into account what does Kenya want to achieve with this? As we grow or improve or better our image, our visibility, what is it that we want out of that? That thinking has to has to go into it, and that's how you come up then with a foreign policy. What are the areas we're going to focus on, and who's going to do it? So the president has a role, and his ministers have a role, especially the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and then his ambassadors have a role, and eventually it's several people or various stakeholders who work towards achieving what you recognize that we have achieved, and really in very many ways it is good for Kenya. People, when people think of a country, what's the first thing that comes into people's minds? Is it a stable country? Can I trust it to go and invest in it? Can I go and visit there? Do they have facilities? All those things. What is the level of expertise for Kenyans? Now, if you, for instance, are engaging on the international scene, whether it's at meetings at the UN or at the AU, various meetings, the visibility of Kenya will come through that. How does Kenya engage? How professional are we? How competent are we? What are we saying? If we're talking about climate change, what are we saying? What are we talking about blue economy? The president, hosted a blue economy conference the other day. In the scheme of things, that's very forward-looking. When you think about blue economy and how important it has become on the world stage, and that an African nation would host something like the blue economy, it says something about Kenya, about the leadership, and about the thinking and seeking opportunities. So all those things work eventually for the good of this country. So that if there's always, countries, people saying, I want to invest in Africa, or I want to open up in 3 countries or 4 countries, or I want to put in this money. Which country should I do that? Now, you want to be top of mind. You want to be one of those that these companies say, okay, we'll go to Kenya, we'll go to country X, we'll go to country Z. So we want to be top of mind. So how do you create that top of mind first reaction, except ensuring that your image and is positive, And so therefore people can relate to it and can see, yes, this is a country I can do business in. These are people I can deal with. This is a place where I'll get high returns. So all those things tie up together for what is then good for Kenya. So I think image and visibility, all those are important, just like they're important for an individual as they carry on, as your career grows. What do people think about this person? So that if a company is headhunting, whose name comes up? If you're looking for somebody in advertising, what's the first name that comes up? So it's the same way for a country, that when people are looking for a place to invest, for a country to engage, to discuss certain issues. And I think you can see, especially now that we're doing so many things on webinars, how often President Kenyatta is on different webinars discussing a variety of issues. That says people see him as somebody who will add value to these discussions, and somebody who has integrity and is committed, to these areas. So all these things eventually do work for the benefit of the country. It is not for the sake of having visibility. It's because, as we agreed on our foreign policy, we recognize this was important to be able to achieve Kenya's interests.
Thank you, Balozi. Now, before I let you go, I'd like to ask, what advice would you give to those Kenyans who would like to join the diplomatic service to promote and serve their country? What advice would you give to them?
One is, as you said right at the beginning, that one needs to understand what actually diplomacy entails, so that you're not getting into it misguided or misinformed, because that can then become a difficult career progression, because you may not have the passion to move on. I think it's important that for young people at the beginning of your career, get into the system. There's very little opportunity later on in life to get into diplomacy, because this is a career. This is something you build on. You start off as a cadet, as they are called, and then you go through the ranks until hopefully you become, an ambassador, a high commissioner. So it's important for young people to recognize this and get into the system at the beginning of their career. And as I said, it's hard work. It is hard work, because, in the beginning, there's not going to be that you've been posted to the country A or country B. You will be sitting at a desk at Ministry of Foreign Affairs and doing very difficult, very hard work, to ensure that you are supporting the rest of the ministry, supporting us in the embassies in terms of any information, any research, that we need. But the one thing is, as I say, once you have passion and you spend the time just gaining the skills and the competencies that you will need, then really I think that it's one of the ministries where career progression is guaranteed, and you see it, and watched young officers join and become professional diplomats. So it's a very interesting career, I have to say that. But as I say, one must get into it for the right reason, not for the perceived reason, and really would encourage young men and women. And I know you asked me about challenges I might face based on my gender, and really maybe it's the sort of person I am. I either ignore it, or it has never happened. I thrive in this job. I thrive in this environment. I really cannot say that there's been any discrimination of any sort, and I've been able to to do my job and to get on with diplomacy. People move all the time, so you're constantly meeting new people, new ambassadors, and I have really not had any challenges in engaging, whether it's in Dublin or here in Addis or anywhere else that I represent, my country at meetings. I really cannot complain. And our ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just like the rest of the government, is committed, to supporting women. I mean, of course, because I'm at that age where I don't have family limitations, but even young diplomats who have families or are getting families, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs takes care of that. They're very conscientious that they do not want to disadvantage a young woman because she's a child, giving age. So she must not in any way be disadvantaged. So even if it's being posted, they're conscientious. Which country are they going to send them to? How does that affect the rest of the family? So all that is taken into consideration, and I think it's very commendable that the ministry would take that into account.
Ambassador, I'd like to thank you very, very much for taking the time to speak to us. It's been a great honor having this discussion. It's most insightful and has informed us about this profession that is mostly shrouded in a little has been known about it. Thank you for shedding light and for visiting our station, and we look forward to having another discussion with you again soon.
Well, thank you very much, Rose. I've enjoyed having this conversation with you, and indeed, if any time in the future there's anything else you would wish us to engage on, especially now that everything is virtual, we can engage wherever I am. I'll be very delighted to come back to Three Stones.
We were talking to Ambassador Catherine Muigai Mwangi, Kenya's ambassador to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the African Union. Thank you for watching. Keep it Three Stones. Nerushoke Mukaro.